Good evening, it's Philip again from Wellington. See, I've started already. Hey, it's a month since our lockdown. We should be celebrating something. So while I was fiddling around with the wines and doing this and that, I thought I'd have a taste. Nice to be with you again, looking at some really delicious, gratifying wines from the southern Rhone. It's warmer down here, so you've got all sorts of different grape varieties that really suit the warm temperatures. And the other gratifying thing about the southern Rhone wines is they're really good value. The first wine we're going to look at is the Mont Redon Lirac Rose, and this is an interesting wine for a number of reasons. It's intrinsically rather good, but it's the comparison with the rosés from the Provence region, which is just a little further towards Italy, running along the coast, whereas Lirac is slightly inland, is quite intriguing. The first thing you see is it's got a much more pronounced rosé-like hue than those Provence wines, which have a typically brown onion skin colour and an indefinable sort of savouriness on the palate. But this wine, the colour gives you a clue, and the nose does have some primary fruit associated with it, albeit in a restrained, elegant sort of way. Slightly raspberry-ish, and the palate is gorgeous. It's full-bodied, particularly in the mid-palate. It's got lovely length and finish, but the mid-palate is bolder, more generous than a Provence rosé would be, and as I said before, altogether delightful, but dry, uncompromisingly dry. And because of the weight in the palate, I would always serve this with food rather than, you know, out on the deck in the sun, which you can do with those other wines from just, you know, 100 miles away in Provence. Lovely wine, and it's made from grape varieties that we don't know much about in New Zealand, Grenache and Cinsault, and they are warm climate grape varieties. Grenache in particular is an aristocrat of the region and indeed of warmer climates. Cinsault is a bit more of a bulk producing red variety, but makes very, very classy additions to rosés. So there you have the first wine tonight, an inland rosé appellation, and it's 2018 and it's $24.99 a bottle, and it's rather good in my opinion. The second wine is our biggest Cote de Rhone selling wine by some margin. We have bought and sold this wine for 10 years now, and our sales keep increasing. The disappointing thing about this wine is whenever we get it, it always tastes a bit fresh and severe, and just as we're running out, it's tasting wonderful. However, that's what happens in the world of wine. This is what the Australians will call, if you see it on shelves, a GSM, and the Cote de Rhone appellation stipulates that you must have 40% Grenache in your blend, and then you may use all sorts of other varieties, but you have to have a little bit, a stipulated minority proportion of both Syrah and Mourvedre. Mourvedre is not a grape we know anything about. It's a warm climate grape, and the Australians sometimes call it Mataro, but it sort of gives you a framework rather than a density in the palate. It gives you, on the edges, some tarry, fruit bushy adornment. Anyway, so this is a blend, and as soon as one smells it, it doesn't smell of anything in particular, except that is It has got a warm, roasted, savoury nose that speaks of a nice, generous, warm climate. And the palate, I used to try and talk about these sorts of flavours on the palate, but I don't think you can really. The palate just flows on from the nose. It has all of those sort of componentries that one can smell on the nose, but also a gentle, approachable palate. Not too tannic, not too acidic, and this is a 2017, it is now drinking perfectly, in my opinion, and just the sort of wine that when you come home at night and you haven't thought about having a bottle of red or something, so you're going to pull it out from the cellar or wherever you keep your wine, and it's a bit cold, this won't really be prejudiced by doing that, because it's got a generosity and it doesn't have waves of acidity and tannin that you have to battle through to get to the fruit, which is what we all want, isn't it? And this wine is just $20.99 a bottle, and if you want a nice winter warmer, I really suggest this is the sort of wine that fits the bill perfectly. Now the last wine, when I'm talking about Grenache, this is a Grenache, and I've left the best to last. This is, it's hard to pronounce, it's called Vacqueyras, and it's the producer, well, they call themselves Domaine le Colombier, but it's owned by a chap called Jean-Louis Moore, whose father bought this vineyard in the 1960s, and he's called it Vacqueyras Vieilles Vignes, which means old vines, and this is because this vineyard is quite small, is about 30-35 years old average age, which is quite old. Grenache doesn't last for 100 years as Syrah can, but this is quite old for Grenache, and he's a very interesting fellow, this chap. He does almost everything himself. He's biodynamic, he prunes, he picks, he makes, he bottles, and he labels. He's a very intriguing, unassuming sort of person. I don't know how we got into touch with him, but I'm delighted that we have, because we've had his wines now for 5 or 6 years, and they are very, very rewarding. Now, Grenache, in my opinion, it is one of the great hot climate grape varieties. It's got, unlike the Cote de Rhone before it, it has got a singular nose, and it's an elusive smell, but it's got a roasted, spicy aspect to it, with a dash of herb or orange thrown into it, and it's got fragrance, which is unusual in a warm climate. So it's a peculiarly fragrant grape and of a charming sort of nose. And the palate has got a hint of plushness and sveltness about it, with a beautifully modulated mid-palate and length to burn. It's an effortless sort of drink, and very, very fine-grained, and it epitomises this grape variety in France. Very, very impressive drink, in my opinion. It's $27.99 a bottle, but by crikey, it's worth it. And these 3 wines, my family are going to have a wonderful couple of nights sipping and tasting these 3 drinks, and I hope that you get excited by what I've said, talked about them, and perhaps experience them yourselves. My time's running out, and I won't be with you next Wednesday because I have been usurped by Alan Scott. He's going to be appearing on Wednesday, but I have a slot on Monday. So perhaps I'll see you then. Cheers.